we wanted Rob Brennan, one of our partners, he's an attorney and a developer. We wanted him to come up and give us kind of a high level top line. What do we Cape Codders think the takeaways are? And give a little bit more attention to this, because it's really easy to get lost in the detail and then wonder, what are you supposed to pay attention to? Please welcome my friend, Rob Brennan.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, everyone. As Lisa said, my name is Rob Brennan. I am not originally from Cape Cod, but Cape Cod is my home now, and I work in housing. So Elisa's asked me, to give a few observations based on, on my perspective, and a little bit on my perspective. I started my career in 1996 as an attorney. For the past 10 years, I've been developing housing here on Cape Cod and the islands as the president of the Cape Built companies. I have recently returned to practicing law here on the Cape, setting up an office in Hyannis for a law firm, Smolak and Vaughn. And why did I do that? Well, I did that, to come back and join the ranks of the attorneys, folks that are in this room, folks like Peter Freeman, who I know is in this room. Those attorneys, those advocates who have been working, with nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, towns, landowners, to help move housing forward, and that is, what I'm proud to be doing now, while staying involved, with the Cape Built companies and our projects that are going through construction, to work in bringing more housing across a broader spectrum in more varieties online here on the Cape. My wife is also launching a company just focusing on ADUs. So that's a market that I know well also. And I've been fortunate over the past few years to serve on the state and national leadership committees for the state home builders, the mass home builders, and now at the national level for the National Association of Home Builders. So you might ask, how did I find housing? Well, I think housing found me, and I'm certainly happy that it did. So just to offer, a couple comments on a local perspective, but informed with a lot of data points on where we are and where we're going. And there was one point that Tim opened with, and I'd like to amplify that. I'd like everyone to please stand just for a moment. And now look around the room at how many people are standing. And now in your mind, double that number. And now in your mind, consider double the number of people that are standing in that room represents one person from each household being forced to leave Cape Cod every year because they make less than $100,000 as a household, and housing is unaffordable to them. That's every year. Now picture all the folks standing in the room and multiply that by 64. Those are the number of households that are overburdened, paying more than 30% of their household income to housing. And that is considered overburdened. So that many times, 64 times the number of people that are standing in this room. That is the scope and the magnitude of the issue that we're talking about. I think everyone in the room understands that, but I just wanted to underscore that. Have a seat. Thank you. What are the impacts of that? What are the impacts of losing that number of people, those number of households every year? Well, one of the impacts, in addition to losing, those service providers, losing those educators, losing those town employees, is that we are also impacting our economy for those of us left behind significantly. Those are 1,000 households leaving every year who are neither producing on Cape Cod anymore, nor consuming on Cape Cod anymore. That has an adverse impact on our gross domestic product as a region. And what does that do? Well, that drives up the prices of goods that we're consuming here. It drives up the prices of production, drives up the prices of every meal that is served, of every product that's on the shelves. And that further eats into the available funds to pay for housing, because more of it is going to pay for the products and the services that we're consuming, because there are fewer people here providing that. We're needing to pay more to hold on to those folks, and we need to pay more to attract them from coming over the Cape. So all of that, has the adverse impact that is slowly and continually driving Cape Cod to be more of an island economy. Those of us who spend any time on the Cape and Highlands know that what we pay for a gallon of milk on the islands is even more than we pay for a gallon of milk here. But that is the impact of losing those households every year, is that we're adversely impacting our economy and driving it more and more to an island economy, not just in terms of the price of housing, but the price of every other good and service, and making more of a burden and exacerbating the flight of those families who can then no longer afford to remain here. Another takeaway that the report touches on, and this is one of infrastructure, is that half of our workforce is coming over the bridges. So in addition, to having to pay more, right, and having those impacts on our economy because of that, we have the additional stresses to our infrastructure. Tim talked about the record number of trips over the bridge. And we all know that has, a constricting impact, particularly, during the summer months. So that is an additional impact that I think is of particular concern to everyone in this room. And we know that it's not sustainable. How did we get here? Well, there are a lot of factors on how we got here. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of them. One is the continued reduction in the number of building permits and the kind of product those permits are being pulled for. So we came into this century in 2000, and we were just approaching 2,000 permits per year, 99 into 2000. Since 2006, we've been about 1,000 permits per year, building permits per year. And in the last 2 years, that's been 500 building permits per year. And what is the kind of housing stock that these permits are being built for? Well, we know that Cape-wide, our housing stock is 82% single family, compared to 50% for the rest of the Cape. So that means that we have a dominant single family market here. And what's been happening, to that? So obviously, number of permits going down, desire being up and being fueled by COVID. So that's putting more and more of a stress on the existing housing stock, the stock that's already being built, because we're not building enough to meet the demand, with new construction. And that's in part because we're restricted in that 86% of our land here on the Cape is either built or protected. So very, very little greenfields available for development. So what happens when there's a high demand on the existing housing stock? And what happens when we're at a housing stock that is predominantly single family, but we know that a workforce needs to rent, right? So we have working families on Cape Cod that are renting single family homes. What happens when we have folks coming in, putting higher demands, commanding higher prices, competing for those homes as their second homes against families that are renting those homes as their year-round homes? Well, we know what happens, because last year, over 500 of those households called into Housing Assistance Corporation to tell them that the homes that they were renting were being sold out from under them. That is the impact from having fewer permits and the kind of housing stock that is predominantly single family. Multifamily housing is one of the major solutions, and it's one tool that we ought to be embracing. Multifamily housing has the greatest flexibility in being able to realize economies and scale. When we can find the right projects in the right locations, which here on Cape Cod, we know means connection to sewer. I tell people, what are the three top challenges to developing housing on Cape Cod? Wastewater, wastewater, wastewater. When we have projects that have wastewater solutions in place, we've solved the first three challenges. And now we're looking at the details. So multifamily housing needs to be seen as the valuable tool that it is. In a healthy market, Multifamily housing, that can be developed by realizing the greatest economies of scale, has the greatest of flexibility, to adjust pricing and to bring pricing down and stay competitive when they need to be competitive because you're in a competitive market. When your vacancy rate is close to zero, it's not a competitive market. How do we get vacancy rates up? Well, we bring on more multifamily housing, more rental options, and you have, competition. So multifamily housing needs to be something that we're embracing because it's an important tool. So where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with something called the missing middle right now. So you look at the capital A affordable housing, and here on Cape Cod, capital A affordable housing, traditionally seen as 80% of AMI, and below, means household incomes, depending on size, between approximately $60,000 and $86,000. That would qualify if we had the available stock for capital A affordable housing. What does it take, for home ownership, here on the Cape? It takes $200,000. So between that 86,000 and that 200,000, that is that missing middle, not having product and not having income, that match up. That is one of the things, that we need to be solving for. And I think everyone here in the room realizes that. And that's why you're here in the room. But just wanted to put a point on it and talk about that missing middle. So I want to do a little poll here as well. And this is not, using the app. But this is something that I have been saying, when I go to state meetings, when I go to national meetings, I talk about the uniqueness of Cape Cod. So just a quick poll. Put your hands up if you care about the place that is Cape Cod, the environment, our susceptibility to climate change, right? 100%, okay? Put your hands up if you care about the people of Cape Cod and the availability of housing, right? That is 100% overlap between people and place. That, in my view, that I think is very unique. And when I talk at the state level about how do we develop housing, but also take into account our impacts on the environment and our impacts on climate, how do we stand at that important intersection of climate and housing and figure out how we're going to move both of those together in lockstep? I tell folks at the state level, I tell folks in DC, I was in Kansas City last week at the national meetings, that the solutions and the innovations will come from Cape Cod, because there is nowhere else in the country where those two factors are so intimately intertwined and so complex a challenge. But having folks in this room, having folks throughout the Cape, having the businesses, having the families that are so vested in figuring out how to solve both. So I think the gathering in this room can be that opportunity to understand that we have been focusing, rightfully so, on how do we protect the place that is Cape Cod. And we've done that, and we continue to do that through our towns, through the Cape Cod Commission, through our climate action plans. This now is the opportunity to address the people. That is the challenge before us. How do we balance, housing and climate? How do we balance housing and the environment? And it is through, innovative ideas. It is through, the simple, attainable solutions that are appropriate for each town. It's also through changing our perspective Cape-wide, what it means, to develop sustainable housing, what it means to have density done right, what it means to build community by building neighborhoods, by augmenting neighborhoods, where they already exist, by taking our activity centers and having them be places not only that people go to, but that people live, to creating more walkable opportunities, in every single town on the Cape. And in doing so, both address housing, and address climate by making life on the Cape and interactions and how we live and where we shop less impactful and less dependent, on vehicles. So that is what I see, as someone who has developed housing on the Cape, who works with developers, works with nonprofits, is entirely vested in the future of the Cape as it relates both to climate and housing. And it's a privilege to be in the room today with our elected officials who are doing this hard work on Beacon Hill, with all of the representatives of the towns, with the businesses who are here because you care about your employees and you care about the futures, of what your children's lives are going to be here on the Cape. So thank you for that opportunity. I look forward to speaking with more of you during the break, and it's a privilege to roll up my sleeves when working alongside you. Thank you.